Jun Xiaokan shoved her first. That was the part nobody saw. The guests were laughing, the crystal chandeliers were throwing gold light across the marble floors, and a 23-year-old black American woman named Amara Bennett was doing her job, carrying a tray of champagne flutes through a crowd of people who had never once looked at her face. He stepped into her path deliberately. She felt his shoulder connect with hers before she could react, and the tray tilted and one flute slipped, and the sound of it hitting the floor was sharp and small and completely swallowed by the music. The room did not stop. The music did not stop. But Jun Seok-han stopped, and he turned. And the look on his face was not anger. It was something quieter and colder than anger. It was amusement. The particular amusement of a man who has never once in his life been told no, and who finds it entertaining when smaller people make mistakes because of him. He said something in Korean that made the men around him laugh. Amara did not need a translator. She had lived in Seoul long enough to understand a certain kind of laugh. She bent down to pick up the broken glass. Her hands were steady. She had learned to keep her hands steady. Then the freezer door opened behind her, and two hands hit her between the shoulder blades. And the last thing she heard before the lock clicked shut was Jun Seok-han saying, in perfectly clean English, "Clean it up in there." The temperature was minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. She had no coat. Her phone had 4% battery. And the nearest person who might have cared was 8,000 miles away in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the story of the night Amara Bennett dialed the wrong number, and the most dangerous man in Seoul picked up. If you have ever been invisible to someone who had power over you, if you have ever been small in a room full of people who did not see you, stay with this story. Like this video, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because what comes next will stay with you. The Hanwoo Grand Estate sat in the hills north of Gangnam like a crown nobody had earned. It had been in the Han family for 3 generations, built by a grandfather who had understood how to make money during Reconstruction, expanded by a father who understood how to keep it, and currently inhabited by a son who understood neither but had learned very early that he did not need to. The estate had 17 rooms visible from the outside and several more that did not appear on any architectural drawing. The kitchens were underground. The wine cellar was underground. The industrial cold storage was underground, which was where Amara Bennett now stood, or tried to stand, her back against a steel shelving unit stacked with vacuum-sealed cuts of imported Wagyu beef that cost more per kilogram than she made in a week. She had been in Seoul for 14 months. She had come on a work visa arranged through a friend of a friend, a catering company called Silbion Services that staffed high-end private events across the city. The work was hard and the pay was modest, and her Korean was functional enough to take orders and apologize, though she was still learning the precise calibrations of when a Korean apology was enough and when more was expected. She had been learning a lot of precise calibrations since arriving. The way to stand when a guest spoke to you, the angle of the bow that said professional rather than servile, the particular expression to maintain when a guest said something about your appearance, not cruel necessarily, just observational in a way that reminded you that you were being observed. She was 23 years old. She had a communications degree from a state school in Georgia that she was still paying off. She had a brother named Marcus, who called every Sunday and always started the call with, "Tell me something good." She had a small apartment in Mapogu with a window that faced another building and a space heater that worked most of the time. She was not unhappy. That was the thing she had been telling herself since October, when the homesickness had settled in like weather. She was not unhappy. She was building something. She had taken the Hanwoo Gala job because the tip rate for private estate events was triple what she made at the hotel banquets, and she needed the money for a language course she had signed up for in January. She had shown up at 4 in the afternoon with the rest of the Silbion crew, changed into the required black and white uniform in a small bathroom off the service corridor, and spent the next 4 hours carrying things from one place to another while people in formal wear moved around her like she was furniture that had learned to walk. She did not resent them. That was the other thing she had been training herself toward. She was a catering worker at an elite event. She was not owed recognition. She did the job. She stayed professional. She went home. She had been doing exactly that, staying professional, carrying a tray of Moet through the east wing of the main hall, when she felt the impact. She had seen Jun Seok-han earlier in the evening. It was hard not to. He was the kind of man who occupied space loudly. Not physically large, but loud in the way he moved. The way the people around him rearranged themselves. The way servers gave him a wider berth than they gave the other guests. I was maybe 30, with the particular good looks of someone who had been told he was attractive since childhood and had stopped being interested in the opinion some years ago. He wore his tuxedo jacket half open. He had been drinking since the cocktail hour. He had said something to one of the female servers near the entrance that made her smile go rigid, and she had walked away toward the kitchen at a pace just slightly too fast to be casual. Amara had clocked all of this the way you clock weather. You note the wind direction. You adjust your path. She had adjusted her path. She had gone left around the edge of the crowd, keeping the tray level, watching where the guests were moving so she could move between them cleanly. She was good at this part. She had always been good at reading the geography of a room, knowing where the gaps were, where the bottlenecks formed, how to get from one side to the other without disrupting anything. She had not accounted for him moving toward her deliberately. She felt it, the intent of it, a half second before the shoulder contact. He had seen her coming, and he had angled into her path, not drunk, not distracted, but watching, with that same quiet, amused expression she would come to know as his resting state. The impact was controlled, just enough to tilt the tray, just enough to send one flute over the edge. The sound of breaking glass on marble was surprisingly small for how loud the aftermath became. Not in the room. The room continued, the music continued, the guests continued. But in the narrow radius around Amara, there was a stillness. Jun Seok looked down at the broken glass and then up at her. He said something to the men flanking him. They laughed. One of them, younger, in a blue tie, clapped him on the shoulder like he'd said something clever. Amara set the tray down on a nearby surface. She crouched to collect the glass. She had a cloth in her apron pocket. She always had a cloth. She was careful with her fingers. The glass had broken clean. She was still crouching when she felt the hands. They hit her between the shoulder blades, flat-palmed, pushing, not punching, the kind of force that was designed to feel like an accident to anyone watching but was completely deliberate to the person receiving it. She stumbled forward, caught herself on her palms on the marble, felt the cold of the floor through her hands. Before she could turn, there were hands on her arm, pulling her up, not helping, propelling, directing. And she was moving through a door she hadn't seen, a service door set flush into the paneling, and then down a short flight of stairs that her feet found by instinct, and then the cold hit her. It was not the cold of winter outside. It was a different kind of cold. It was the manufactured cold of a space designed to hold things at specific temperatures below human tolerance. The shelves of the industrial freezer were steel, and the floor was steel, and the light was a single fluorescent panel mounted to the ceiling, and the door behind her closed with a sound like a bank vault, and she heard the lock engage. She turned around and hit the door with both fists. It did not move. It was industrial. It was not supposed to move. "Hey!" Her voice came out thin. She hit the door again. "Hey! Open the door." On the other side, muffled by the insulation, she heard laughter. She heard Jun Seok Han's voice say something, then nothing. Amara stood with her fists against the door for 3 full seconds. Then she turned around and looked at the room she was in. It was roughly the size of a large walk-in closet. 3 walls of steel shelving, floor to ceiling, stacked with vacuum-sealed meat, and labeled bins and tall bottles of something that might have been imported sauce, or might have been something else. The temperature was visible. Her breath was already coming out white, each exhale a small cloud that dissipated fast. She was wearing a short-sleeved black shirt under the white service jacket. The service jacket was not insulated. She had no hat, no gloves. Her shoes were thin-soled, event wear, decorative more than functional. She went to the door and searched it. There was no interior release handle. Older models had them. This one did not, or if it did, it had been removed or was on the other side of a panel she couldn't access in the current light. She checked the hinges. The hinges were on the outside. She looked at the shelves. Steel, no loose materials, nothing she could use as a lever. The door was solid and cold and completely indifferent to her situation. She pulled out her phone. 4%. She stood very still for a moment and processed that number. 4% was approximately 20 minutes of screen time if she used it carefully. Less if she made calls. She needed to call someone who would answer immediately, understand immediately, and act immediately. She needed to call someone who knew where she was. The only person who knew where she was tonight was her supervisor from Silbion, a tired woman named Ms. Choi, who had been running events for 15 years and whose phone, Amara knew, was perpetually on silent during service because she didn't want calls from staff interrupting her client conversations. Amara did not have her personal number. She had the company line, which went to voicemail after hours. She had Marcus's number. She had it memorized because she had always been slightly afraid of losing it, of something happening and not being able to reach him. It was the one number she never needed to look up. She dialed it. She held the phone to her ear and listened to it ring. It rang 6 times. Then it went to voicemail. Marcus's voicemail message, his actual voice, easy and warm, saying, "You've reached Marcus. Leave something good," made her throat close. She did not leave a message. She couldn't afford the battery. She stood in the freezer and breathed and tried to think. Her fingers were already going numb. Not painful yet, just absent, the way fingers go when the cold reaches a certain depth. She tucked them under her arms. She started moving in place, small steps, trying to keep her core temperature stable. She had read, somewhere, that movement was important, that you should not stop moving. She could not remember where she had read that or whether it was reliable. She tried the number again. This time, she misdialed on the 3rd digit. Her fingers on the touchscreen were not responding precisely anymore. And she didn't notice until it rang twice and an unfamiliar voice answered. The voice was male, Korean, low in register, the kind of low that didn't try to be anything. "Who is this?" Amara's brain was already slowing. She said, "I'm sorry, I think I dialed wrong. I'm in a freezer. I need help." A pause. Short. Not uncertain. Calculating. "Say that again." "I'm in a freezer. I'm at the Hanwoo estate in the hills. It's a gala. I'm a catering worker. Someone locked me in the industrial freezer and I don't have much battery and I don't know." She stopped. Her teeth were starting to chatter. She pressed her jaw together and forced them still. "I don't know who to call. I'm sorry. I dialed the wrong number." Another pause. "How long have you been in there?" She looked at her phone screen. She had to look twice because her vision had gone slightly strange at the edges, a shimmering she didn't like the feel of. "Maybe 4 minutes? 5? What's your name?" "Amara. Amara Bennett." "Are you injured?" "No, it's very cold." "I know what temperature those units run." His voice had not changed register. It was not warm. It was not cold. It was precise. "I need you to keep moving. Don't sit down. Don't stop talking to me." "Who are you?" "Someone who answered the phone," he said. "Keep moving. Tell me something. Anything. What do you see?" "Shelves," she said. "Meat. A lot of meat. Some bottles. One light on the ceiling." She was walking in a small oval now, 4 steps each direction. "The light is flickering." "Don't look at the light. Look at the walls. Is there anything on them? Any panels, any electrical boxes, any release mechanisms?" She looked. She made herself focus. "There's a panel on the east wall, or what I think is east, low, near the floor. It has a small red indicator light. Can you reach it?" "Yes." She crouched and her knees protested and her fingers fumbled at the panel. "It's a maintenance access, I think. It's got a latch." "Open it." She opened it. Inside was a coil of heavy electrical cable and a small box with a numbered keypad. "There's a keypad. What numbers are on it?" "Standard keypad 1 through 9, 0 at the bottom. There's a green button and a red button. Try 0 zeros in and then the green button." She tried it. Nothing happened. "Try 1, 2, 34. "That's not... Nobody uses... Try it." She tried it. A small beep, but no click, no release. She sat back on her heels and her back hit the shelving unit and several vacuum-sealed packages shifted and one fell on the floor next to her. She looked at it. Wagyu A5. There was a small gold sticker on the label. She thought, that one package probably costs more than my rent. The thought made her laugh, which surprised her. A small, strange laugh that had nothing to do with anything being funny. "Amara." His voice was sharper now, just slightly. "I'm here," she said. "I'm fine. The code didn't work." "Stand up. Keep moving. Can you hear anything through the door? Voices? Footsteps?" She went back to the door and pressed her ear against it. The cold of the steel against her cheek was a specific kind of painful. "Nothing," she said. "The music. Far away. The gala is still going. What floor are you on? Underground, below the main kitchen. We came down a service staircase. How many stairs? She tried to count from memory. 12? 13? Short flight. And the exterior of the building, do you know which side of the estate the kitchen is on? She tried to construct the layout in her mind. She had come in through the service entrance on the north side, past the loading dock, through the kitchen corridor that ran along the back of the building. The freezer door had been at the far end of the corridor, which meant north side, maybe northeast, past the main kitchen and the dry storage. Good. A sound on his end, not loud. Movement. The soft sound of a car door. Keep talking to me. You're doing well. You don't have to... She stopped. The chattering was worse now. You don't have to stay on the phone. You should call the police for me. Or, I'm coming, he said. She stood in the freezer and looked at her phone screen. 2% now. You're coming, she repeated. Yes. You don't know me. No. Then why? Because you called, he said. And his voice was still flat, still precise, but there was something underneath it she couldn't name, something that had no translation in this cold steel room. Stop asking questions. Keep moving. Tell me about something you like. Anything. She tried to think of something she liked. Her brain was sluggish. My brother calls me every Sunday, she said. He always asks me to tell him something good. And what do you tell him? Different things. She was walking her oval again. 4 steps, turn, 4 steps. Sometimes I tell him about the food here. He loves food. He's never been out of the country, but he talks about wanting to go to Japan someday for the ramen. What else? I told him about the light in October, she said. The way it comes through the buildings in the morning in this specific direction that's... I don't know, it's different here. He said that sounded like something from a movie. She heard wind on his end, heard an engine. He was moving fast. Amara. Yeah. 1% means you have about 3 minutes. I need you to listen to me. Okay? When this call drops, do not sit down. Do not let yourself sleep. Your body is going to tell you that sitting is rest and rest is good. It is lying to you. Keep moving. Keep counting something. Count the packages on the shelves. Count backwards from 200. Count your steps. Do you understand me? Count backwards from 200, she said. Yes. I'm 7 minutes out. How do you know where? I know the Hanwoo estate. The call dropped. Amara looked at her phone. The screen was black. She pressed the button and it came on for a second. Dead, the battery finally gone. And then it went dark again and she was alone with the fluorescent light and the shelves and the slowly narrowing distance between the temperature of the room and the temperature of her skin. She started counting. 200, 199, 198. At 144, her legs stopped listening to her properly. She caught herself on the shelving unit, her numb fingers grabbing at the steel edge, and she held on and breathed and told herself it was fine. She was fine. She was still standing. She was still counting. At 111, the light started doing something strange. Not flickering, pulsing almost at the edge of her vision. She knew this was her brain. She knew this was what happened when the core temperature dropped past a certain point. She had read this somewhere. She couldn't remember where. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the Sunday call she would not be able to make if she sat down. She did not sit down. At 93, she heard something on the other side of the door. Not music, something percussive, closer, louder. Footsteps on the staircase. More than one person. Then a voice, low and immediate, giving an instruction in Korean. She didn't catch all of it. Her Korean was functional, not fluent, and her mind was working slowly. But she caught the word for door and the word for now. Then a sound she felt in her sternum more than heard. A single impact against the door, hard and precise. Something that knew exactly where the lock mechanism was. The door opened. The first thing she registered was warmth, or the memory of warmth, the contrast of slightly less cold air against her skin. Then light, brighter than the fluorescent, from the corridor beyond. Then a figure in the doorframe, and the figure was not looking at her with pity or alarm. He was looking at her the way someone looks at a situation they are already solving. He was tall for a Korean man. He wore a dress coat that was not a catering uniform. He had the kind of stillness that people in his position develop over time. A stillness that was not passivity, but controlled force, like a held breath before an exhale. He crossed the floor in 4 steps, and his coat was already off his shoulders by the time he reached her, and he wrapped it around her, and she felt the silk lining against her arms and the warmth that was still in the fabric from his body. "I've got you," he said, in English, not accented perfectly, but clearly, precisely. She looked up at him. Her vision was still doing the edge shimmer thing. She tried to say something sensible. What came out was, "You came." "Yes," he said, "you really came." "I said I would." He looked at her face with an expression she would spend a long time afterward trying to categorize. Not tenderness, exactly. Not concern the way a civilian might display concern. Something more like recognition, like he saw something specific and registered it. "Can you walk?" She considered the question honestly. "Maybe." "Maybe is enough." He looked back toward the door where a second man was waiting, broader, with the face of someone who had been in rooms like this before. He said something to him in Korean, brief and specific. Then he looked back at Amara. "Put your weight on me." She did. They walked out of the freezer, through the service corridor, up the 13 stairs she had counted on the way down. On the landing, the kitchen had gone completely silent. Every Sylbion worker, every kitchen staff member, every Han family employee who had been in that room was now still, watching, in the specific configuration of people who are trying very hard not to be noticed by someone who has just walked into a space and assumed authority over it without saying a word. Against the far wall, Jun Seo-kan was standing with 3 of the friends he had been laughing with earlier. He was not laughing now. He looked at Tae-hyun with an expression that started as irritation and recalibrated very quickly into something else, as the man's full attention moved across the room and landed on him. Tae-hyun said 4 words in Korean. The room was quiet enough that she heard each one clearly. She didn't understand them. Later, Min-jae would translate. He had said, "Tell me where she was." Jun-seok told him. And then Tae-hyun did something that confused her for a long time afterward. He looked away from Jun-seok immediately, the way you look away from something that has become uninteresting, and he walked Amara out of the kitchen and through the service corridor and out into the cold, dark air of the estate's north courtyard, where 2 black cars were idling, and he put her in the back seat of the first one, and he got in beside her, and he said one quiet sentence to the driver, and the car moved. She was shaking hard now, the real shaking, the warming shaking, which was supposed to mean her body was fighting back. She hoped that was what it meant. She pressed her face into the shoulder of his remaining jacket layer because she did not have the muscle control to hold herself upright anymore, and it was the closest solid thing, and he let her. Neither of them spoke. The city moved past the windows. The Hanwoo estate disappeared behind them in the dark. She thought, "I called the wrong number. I called completely the wrong number." She did not yet understand that wrong numbers sometimes are the most precise things that happen to you. The car smelled like leather and something that might have been cedar, and Amara sat in the back seat with her knees pressed together and her hands tucked under her thighs, because she still couldn't control the shaking, and she didn't want whoever this man was to see how bad it had gotten. He sat beside her with 3 inches of space between them and his eyes forward and his jaw set, and he didn't try to fill the silence. She appreciated that more than she could have explained. The driver didn't speak either. The city moved past in streaks of orange and white light. She said, "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere warm," he said, "with a doctor." "I don't need—" "Your lips are still blue." He said it without looking at her. Not unkind, just accurate. She touched her lower lip with her fingertip and felt almost nothing. "I'm fine." "You've been saying that," he said. "You weren't." She looked at the side of his face. He was maybe 35, maybe older, the kind of face that didn't advertise its age. There was a small scar below his left ear that disappeared into his collar. His hands were folded in his lap, and they were completely still, which she found unsettling in a way she couldn't name because her own hands hadn't been still in 40 minutes. "I'm Amara," she said. "You know that already." "Yes." "What's your name?" A pause, not reluctant, measuring. "Tae-hyun," he said. "Just Tae-hyun." "For now." She let that sit. "Okay. For now." She looked back at the window. "Thank you. For coming. You didn't have to do that." "No," he agreed. "Most people wouldn't have." "Most people," he said, "aren't me." It should have sounded arrogant. It didn't, quite. because he said it the same way he said everything else. Flat, factual, without any particular investment in how it landed. The car pulled through a gate that opened before they reached it. She watched the intercom panel slide past her window. No one had pressed a button. No one had announced their arrival. The gate simply opened, as though the city had been informed of their approach and rearranged itself accordingly. The building they pulled into was corporate in the way that meant money had been spent not to look like money had been spent. Concrete and glass, understated, the kind of architecture that wanted you to think about function and not wonder what the function was. An underground entrance, a private elevator that required a keycard that Taehyun produced from his inside pocket without looking for it. The elevator opened into something that was not a penthouse and not a hospital, but occupied a strange clinical space between them. White walls, recessed lighting, a woman in her 50s waiting by a door with a medical bag over one shoulder and an expression that said she had been called at odd hours before and had made her peace with it. "Dr. Yoon," Taehyun said. "She's hypothermic," the doctor said, looking at Amara directly. Not at Taehyun. "How long?" 25 minutes in the unit, approximately, Taehyun said. -20, standard walk-in industrial. Dr. Yoon looked at Amara's hands, her face, the particular gray quality that cold had given her skin. "Can you tell me your name?" "Amara Bennett." "Do you hurt anywhere? Head, chest?" "My hands hurt," Amara said, "and my feet. They started hurting a few minutes ago." "That's good," Dr. Yoon said. "The pain means circulation is returning. Come with me." Amara went with her. At the door, she looked back at Taehyun. He was still standing where he had stopped, coat gone, in a black dress shirt and dark trousers, watching her go with that same measuring expression. "Your coat," she said. "I still have your coat." "Keep it," he said. "For now." She didn't know why the repetition of that phrase, "for now," made her feel the way it did, like a door held open, like a sentence with no period. Dr. Yoon took her into a room with a heated blanket and an IV line and very little conversation beyond the clinical. She checked Amara's core temperature, her extremities, her blood pressure. She said the words mild to moderate, and she said the words no permanent damage, and she said rest and rewarming and don't push it. She gave Amara a cup of something hot that tasted like barley tea and sat with her until the worst of the shaking stopped. At some point, Amara realized she had been crying a little, not from fear or pain. Something had loosened in her chest when the warmth started returning to her hands. Some knot she'd been holding since the freezer door clicked shut, and the release of it had come out sideways as tears she hadn't authorized. She wiped her face on the sleeve of Taehyun's coat. Dr. Yoon pretended not to notice, which Amara appreciated. An hour later, she was sitting upright in the clinic room with the heated blanket around her shoulders and the IV still in her arm when the door opened and a man she hadn't seen before came in. Broad, with the face she'd clocked in the doorway of the freezer, the second man who had come with Taehyun. He had a phone in his hand. And, "Mr. Kang would like to speak with you," he said, "if you're well enough." "Mr. Kang." She filed that away. "Sure," she said. He led her out of the clinic room and down a corridor and into a room that was set up with a low table and 2 chairs and a view of the city through a floor-to-ceiling window. Seoul at 1 in the morning was still lit like it hadn't received the memo about night. Taehyun was standing at the window with his back to her, his shirt sleeves rolled up, a glass of something in his right hand that he wasn't drinking. The broad man, she still didn't have a name, left and closed the door. Taehyun turned. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her, that same precise assessment, but something in it was slightly different now, less clinical. She couldn't have said what had shifted. "Sit," he said. "Please." She sat. He sat across from her and put the glass on the table between them and left it there. "You're feeling better," he said. Not a question. "Yes, Dr. Yoon is..." She paused. "She works for you." "Yes." "This place." Amara looked at the walls, the window, the expensive blankness of everything. "This isn't a corporate office." "No," he said. "What is it?" "A private medical facility," he said. "Among other things." "Among other things?" She looked at him. "Who are you?" He picked up the glass and turned it once. "You asked me that in the car. You didn't answer. I told you my name." "You told me part of your name," she said. "And you said for now. which means you were already thinking about what you'd tell me later." Her voice was steady. She was surprised by how steady it was. The cold had done something to her, she thought, stripped some layer of careful politeness she usually maintained with strangers. "So, who are you? The real answer." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "My full name is Kang Tai-hyun. I manage financial networks and organizational interests across several districts in Seoul. Some of those interests are legal, some of them are not." The room was quiet. "You're in organized crime," she said. "That's one way to say it. What's another way?" "That I control things that other people can't control." He said it without any particular pride. "Infrastructure, debt, territory, people who need managing." Amara sat with that. Her hands were warmer now. She could feel all 10 fingers. She pressed them flat against her thighs and thought about the fact that she was sitting in a room in an unregistered facility somewhere in Seoul with a man who had just told her he ran criminal networks, and that she was alive and warm because of him, and that she had no phone and no way to contact anyone, and that the door behind her was closed. "Are you going to hurt me?" she said. Something moved across his face. Not offense, not exactly, more like the particular weariness of a man who has been asked a question that reveals how far other people's understanding of him falls from the truth. "No," he said. "Are you going to ask something of me? In return for tonight?" "No. People don't do things for strangers without wanting something." "I know," he said. "And yet." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them moved. "The Han family," she said. "Jun Seok-han, you know them." "I know everyone in that circle," he said. "Then you know what he did to me wasn't spontaneous. That was a man who does that kind of thing and knows nothing will happen to him because of who his family is." She kept her voice even, but she could hear the edges of something sharper underneath it. "I want to know what my options are. Real options, not what I'm supposed to say." Taehyun was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your options through official channels are limited. The Han family has held relationships with 3 district prosecutors for over a decade. They fund 2 city council seats. The estate has its own legal department that employs 12 attorneys who specialize specifically in suppressing civil claims from contracted service workers." He said this without inflection, the way someone reads a weather report. "You would file. They would delay. They would investigate your background, your work authorization, your visa status. They would make the process expensive and slow and demoralizing. In 18 months, you would receive a settlement offer, modest, conditional on your silence, or nothing." Amara listened to all of this and felt it land in her chest like stones dropped into water. "You've seen it before," she said, "many times. With the Hanwoo family specifically." A slight pause. "They are not unknown to me." She noticed the phrasing, the way he used distance as punctuation. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that I have watched the Han family operate for a long time, and that there are people who have been waiting for a correct moment to address certain debts. They've accumulated." "Debts," she repeated. "Financial. Otherwise." She felt the temperature of the conversation shift. Not threatening. Something more careful than that. Like he was opening a door in a dark room and holding the light so she could see what was inside without stepping into it yet. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want to say that clearly." "Okay. I mean it. I don't want someone hurt on my behalf. I don't want to be part of whatever this—" She gestured at the room, at him, at the unseen machinery she felt humming around her. "I want justice. I want what happened to me tonight to have a consequence." "Those are not always the same thing," he said. "I know that." "Do you?" "I grew up black in Georgia," she said. "I know the difference between justice and what actually happens." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his face that wasn't management or assessment, something more raw than that. He said, "Then you already know that consequence in your situation requires a different kind of leverage than the law provides. I'm not asking you to do anything. I know you're not. Then why are we still talking about the Han family?" "Because," he said, "you didn't ask me to do anything. That doesn't mean nothing will be done." The silence that followed was the longest one yet. She felt it like pressure. "I need to sleep," she said finally. My phone is dead, and I need to call my brother and tell him I'm alive and I need to sleep." He stood. He went to the door and opened it and said something to whoever was in the corridor. The broad man appeared. "Minjae will get you a phone," Taehyun said. "And a room. You're not in a condition to travel." "I'm okay." "You're not," he said, "and you know it. Rest. We can speak more in the morning if you want to, or I can have a car take you home." He paused. "Either way is your choice." She looked at him. He meant it. She could tell, though she couldn't have explained how. The choice was genuinely hers. That was a strange thing to feel in a room like this, in a building like this, with a man like this. "Room," she said. "For tonight." He nodded. He was already turning away. "Tae-hyun." He stopped. "Why did you really answer the phone?" she said. "You could have hung up. Most people would have." He stood with his back half turned and she watched his shoulders, the set of them, and for a moment he looked like someone who had been asked a question he'd been avoiding asking himself. "I don't know," he said, and walked out. Minjae gave her a phone, a clean one, still in the packaging, the kind you bought in bulk, and took her to a room that was simpler than she expected. A bed, a window with the blinds drawn, a door that locked from the inside. He showed her the lock himself without being asked, and she appreciated that too. She called Marcus. He answered on the second ring, which meant it was noon in Atlanta, which meant he was probably on his lunch break, sitting in his car in the parking lot of the distribution center where he worked, eating the sandwich he made every morning from the same bread and the same turkey he bought every weekend. "Tell me something good," he said. She sat on the edge of the bed in another man's coat and felt her throat close again. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm okay, I needed to hear your voice." A pause. Marcus was good at pauses. He had a stillness to him that was the opposite of alarm. When something was wrong, he got quieter, not louder. "What happened?" "Something happened tonight at work. I'm okay. I'm somewhere safe." She pressed her forehead with her free hand. "I'll tell you everything, I promise. I just needed—" "I'm here," he said. "I'm right here. Take your time." She told him the facts. Not all of them. Not the man who answered the phone, or the building she was in, or the word criminal said plainly in a room at 1 a.m. But the freezer, the lock, the temperature. Her voice was level through most of it, and then it wasn't, and she stopped talking and Marcus said nothing, just stayed on the line, and she got herself back together and finished. "Are you going to the police?" he said. "I don't know yet." "Amara." I know. I will. I'll figure it out in the morning." "Come home," he said. "I'll buy you a ticket right now. Come home." She looked at the window. The blinds were dark and she couldn't see Seoul behind them, but she knew it was there. The lights, the cold, the hill, where the Hanwoo estate sat behind its walls. "Not yet," she said. "Why?" She didn't have an answer that would make sense. She said, "Because I'm not done here yet." He didn't push. That was the thing about Marcus. He knew when a decision had already been made and he was just being informed. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. The weather in Atlanta, the food she'd been eating, a story about a neighbor's dog that had gotten into someone's trash. And when they hung up, she felt emptier and more solid at the same time, the way you do after you've been held and then let go. She did not sleep for a long time. She lay in the dark and thought about Jun Seo-khan's face in the kitchen, the recalibration, the fear moving in to replace the irritation. She thought about what Tae-hyun had said. There are people who have been waiting for a correct moment to address certain debts. She thought about what she had said in response. "I don't want revenge." She still meant it. She was almost certain she still meant it. In the morning, Minjae knocked at 7:30 and told her breakfast was set in the room with the table in the window. She washed her face with cold water and put the coat back on over the clothes she'd slept in because there was nothing else, and she went. Tae-hyun was already there. He had coffee in front of him and a phone on the table that he was not looking at. He looked like he had slept, but not much. There was a quality to him in daylight that was different from the night before. Still controlled, still precise, but less curated. Like the performance had scaled back slightly because the audience had been reduced to one. She sat down. There was food, congee, boiled egg, some kind of pickled side that she didn't recognize, but ate anyway because she was hungry in the specific depleted way of a body that had spent calories staying alive. "The Han family," he said, without preamble. She looked up. I told you last night that certain debts had accumulated. He turned the phone face up on the table and slid it toward her. The screen showed a financial document. She could see column headers, numbers, dates. Jun Seok Han is not the primary interest. His father is. Hanwoo Holdings has been in contractual default with several institutions that I represent since Q3 of last year. The total outstanding is significant. She looked at the document without picking up the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because what I do with that information will have consequences for the family, he said, and you should know before it happens. Before it happens, she repeated, you've already decided. The decision was made in Q3, he said. Last night changed the timeline. She looked at him directly. Because of me. He was quiet for one beat. Yes. That's... She stopped. She picked up the congee spoon and put it down again. That's not something I authorized. No. I told you last night. You told me you didn't want revenge, he said. What I do with a contractual default is not revenge. It's business. His voice was even. The two things happen to converge. Conveniently. Yes. She felt the heat of it move through her. Not anger exactly, something more complicated. Because she understood what he was doing. She understood the logic of it, the precision of it, the way it was structured so that she couldn't technically object because she hadn't technically been consulted. And she felt the pull of it, the dark pull of consequence landing on a man who had walked away laughing from the sound of a lock engaging, and she hated that she could feel that pull and still know it was wrong. What happens to Jun-seok? She said. He is not the financial target. That's not what I asked. Taehyun looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something shifted underneath it, a slight tightening. The look of a man who has been asked to be precise about something he would prefer to leave imprecise. The family will lose assets, he said. Jun-seok specifically will lose the insulation that comes with being the heir to those assets. The legal protection, the social protection, the ability to do what he did last night and walk back into a party. And what else? Silence. Tae-hyun. He made a choice last night, he said. Choices have weight. She sat back in the chair. The food in front of her had gone slightly cold. She looked at him, and he looked at her. And she understood then, fully, what kind of man was sitting across the table from her. Not a monster. She had met monsters, and they looked different. They felt different. They didn't have Dr. Yoon on call or give you a room with a lock on the inside. But not safe either. Not the kind of man whose decisions she could bracket off from her own conscience just because she hadn't asked for them. I want to go home today, she said. Of course. And I want you to know, she chose each word carefully, that I'm grateful for last night, genuinely. I would have died in that freezer. That matters to me, and I know what it cost you to come, and I won't pretend it didn't happen. She met his eyes. But I don't want this. Whatever this is, I don't want to be the reason that someone, you are not the reason, he said. And for the first time there was something in his voice that wasn't controlled. Not anger. Something that sat just below it. I am the reason. I make my own decisions. I always have. She looked at him and saw it. The thing underneath the precision. The thing that had answered a stranger's wrong number phone call at 1 a.m. and driven through the frozen city and broken down a locked door without being asked. She couldn't name it exactly. It wasn't heroism. It was something older than heroism and less comfortable. She said, last night, on the phone, you told me to keep talking. You told me to count backwards. You've told me to tell you something I liked. She paused. You said you didn't know why you answered. I said that, he confirmed. Do you know now? He looked at the window. Outside, Seoul was gray and cold and entirely indifferent to the question. Not entirely, he said. Min-jae drove her home at 11. She sat in the back seat of a different car than the one from last night. This one black also, unmarked also, with tinted windows that made the city outside look like a photograph of itself. She had Tae-hyun's coat folded in her lap because she'd tried to leave it, and Min-jae had said with considerable care that Mr. Kong had asked her to keep it until she was sure she had no further use for it. She did not know what that meant. She suspected Tae-hyun did. Her apartment in Mapogu looked small when she walked into it. It had always been small, but now it felt it. The low ceiling, the window facing another building, the space heater ticking in the corner. She sat on the edge of her bed with the coat still in her arms, and looked at the opposite wall and tried to construct a clear thought about what had happened in the last 14 hours. She had been locked in a freezer. She had nearly died. She had been rescued by a man who ran criminal enterprises in a city she had moved to alone at 23. She had slept in his building and eaten his food and had a conversation with him that she could not quite locate in any moral framework she had previously operated within. And somewhere on the north side of the city, on a hill behind a wall, a family was about to discover that the man they had failed to consider was no longer willing to wait. She was still sitting there at 2 in the afternoon when her phone, the clean one Minjae had let her keep, buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "The Hanwoo Holdings Board called an emergency session this morning. 3 major creditors have formally accelerated their debt instruments. Legal teams are already engaged." She stared at the message. Then a second one. "This would have happened with or without last night. I want you to know that." She put the phone face down on the bed and sat with her hands flat on her knees and breathed. Outside the window, somewhere in the direction she could not see, the Hanwoo estate was beginning its slow unwinding. She had not asked for it. She had not stopped it. She had sat across a table from Kong Tai-hyun and said, "I don't want revenge," and he had said, "I know," and both things were true, and neither of them was the whole story. A third text came. It said, "You asked me why I answered. I've been thinking about it. When you spoke, you didn't ask me to save you. You just told me the truth about what was happening. I don't know many people who do that." She read it twice, then 3 times. She did not respond. But she did not delete it either. And somewhere between those 2 choices, she understood that the night of the freezer had not ended when the door opened. It had only just become something else entirely. She didn't respond to the texts for 3 days. Not because she had decided not to, but because every time she picked up the phone and opened the message thread, she read those last words again. "You didn't ask me to save you, you just told me the truth." And she put the phone back down and went to do something else, something physical, something that required her hands and her eyes, and left no room for the particular kind of thinking that Kong Tai-hyun seemed to produce in her without trying. She cleaned the apartment. She reorganized the small shelf above her desk where she kept her language books. She went to the market 2 blocks over and spent too long choosing between 2 types of winter squash, and then bought both. She made soup from scratch the way her grandmother had taught her, standing over the pot stirring it long after it needed stirring, just for something to do with her hands. On the second day, she went to the Silbion Services office. Her supervisor, Ms. Choi, was a small woman with reading glasses permanently pushed up on her head and the particular exhaustion of someone who had been managing other people's crises for so long that she had stopped distinguishing between sizes of crisis. She looked at Amara across the cluttered desk and said, "I heard about the gala," which meant she had heard something, though Amara did not know what version or from whom. "I need to know what my options are," Amara said, "for filing a complaint." Ms. Choi took her glasses off her head and cleaned them with the hem of her cardigan. "Against who?" "Jun Seok Han." The glasses cleaning stopped. Amara, "I know about the family." She kept her voice level. "I know about their connections. I just want to know what the company's position is, whether Silbion will support a formal complaint." Ms. Choi put her glasses back on. She looked at Amara the way someone looks at a person who has asked a question they already know the answer to but need to hear said aloud anyway. "The company's position is that we value our relationship with all client families and that we would need to conduct an internal review before—" "He locked me in a freezer," Amara said. The words sat on the desk between them. Ms. Choi looked at her hands. "I know," she said quietly. "I know what happened. I'm sorry it happened. But if Silbion files a formal complaint against Hanwoo Holdings, we lose every event contract we hold with families in that network. That's 60% of our annual revenue." She looked up. "I have 47 employees." Amara nodded. She had expected this. She had known, sitting in Tae-hyun's room with the city spread out below, that she had expected this. That didn't make it smaller. "I understand," she said. "You could file personally, as an individual." "I know." "I could give you the name of an attorney who—" "I know," she said again. She stood. "Thank you, Ms. Choi." She was at the door when her supervisor said, "Amara, be careful. The Han family is not— when they feel threatened, they don't respond the way ordinary people respond." Amara looked back at her. "I know," she said for the 3rd time. That seems to be the thing everyone knows. She walked home through the cold with her hands in her pockets, and the specific hollow feeling of a door closing on a path she had already known was blocked. On the third day, she texted Taehyun back. She wrote, "How bad is it for them?" He responded in 4 minutes. The board meeting ended with 3 director resignations. The primary holding company has had its credit line suspended. The estate has been flagged as collateral in 2 simultaneous debt recovery actions. She wrote, "And Jun Seok." A longer pause this time. Then, "He retained private counsel yesterday. He's attempting to structure a preemptive civil settlement with your employer to close off the liability before you can act on it individually." She stared at the screen. "Read it again." "He's trying to pay off Silbion," she wrote. "Already done," Taehyun replied. "The agreement was signed this morning. Your employer accepted." The soup she had made was still on the stove. She turned off the burner and sat down on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet because it was the closest flat surface and her legs had decided they were finished. Miss Choi had known. When she'd said the attorney's name, when she'd said be careful, she had already signed the agreement. She had been managing Amara with the practiced, apologetic efficiency of someone closing a door gently so no one could say they'd slammed it. Amara sat on her kitchen floor for a long time. Then she called Taehyun. He answered before the second ring. "You saw," he said. "How do you know this?" Her voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. "How do you know within hours that an agreement was signed between a catering company and a private family's legal team?" "Because I have people who watch these things." "Why?" "Because," he said, "the Han family has been in my peripheral vision for 2 years, and I pay attention to what they do." "Before last week," she said, "before the gala, you already had people watching them." "Yes." She pressed her free hand flat against the cold tile floor. "So when you said the debt action had nothing to do with me, the debt action had nothing to do with you. I said that truthfully. But you used what happened to me to move up the timeline." A pause. "Yes." "And you didn't tell me that explicitly." "No," he said, "I didn't." She sat with that for a moment, with the particular feeling of being both grateful and used and not being able to fully separate the two. "I need to think," she said. "I know. I need you to not contact me for a few days." Another pause. Longer. "Okay," he said. I'm not. This isn't me saying I think you're a bad person." "I know what it is," he said. "Take the time you need." She ended the call and stayed on the kitchen floor until the cold of the tile came through her jeans and forced her up. She thought about Marcus. She thought about what he would say if she told him the full version, not the edited version she'd given him on the phone, but the real one. The man who answered. The room underground. The texts from an unknown number telling her about a family's financial collapse in real time. She knew what Marcus would say. He would say, "Come home." He would say it more than once, and he would mean it more each time, and eventually she would stop having a reason to say, "Not yet." She didn't want to stop having a reason to say, "Not yet." That scared her more than the cold had. She spent 2 more days not calling Taehyun and not calling Marcus, and instead filing a formal individual complaint with the Seoul Labor Rights Commission, which was the correct legal channel for a foreign contracted worker who had experienced workplace violence, and which she knew from the moment she submitted it would take somewhere between 4 months and never to produce a result. She filed it anyway, because it was the right thing, because she needed to do one thing that was clean. She was coming out of the commission office on the 4th morning when she saw the news alert on her phone. Jun Seok Han, hospitalized, hypothermia, found in the Hanwoo Estate cold storage unit, condition listed as serious. She stopped walking. A man behind her said something irritated in Korean as he sidestepped around her. She read the alert 3 times. Then she called Taehyun. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't," she said. A silence that lasted long enough to be an answer. "Tell me," she said again, "that you did not put him in that freezer." "I didn't put him in the freezer," Taehyun said. "Then what?" "He went in himself." His voice was precise, measured, the way it was when he was choosing each word. "The estate is in receivership proceedings. His access codes were revoked as part of the asset freeze. He went to retrieve personal items from the storage unit, and the electronic lock cycled on a system error. He was in there for approximately 90 minutes before building staff found him. Amara stood on the sidewalk in the cold air of Seoul and felt something move through her that she did not have a clean name for. A system error, she said. Yes. Tae-hyun. The lock cycled on a system error, he said again. The same words. The same tone. Did your people have access to the building systems? A pause. My people are involved in several aspects of the receivership process. That's not what I asked. Amara, did your people cause the system error? The silence lasted 4 seconds. She counted. He is alive, Tae-hyun said finally. He will have some permanent cold damage to his extremities. He was in there for 90 minutes. You were in there for approximately 25. I want you to hold that proportion. She felt the anger move through her so fast and so complete it was almost clarifying, like a glass of cold water thrown in the face. Not painful, just suddenly, completely awake. You don't get to do that, she said. You don't get to put a number next to what happened to me and use it to justify. I'm not justifying anything. You are. You're saying his 90 minutes is the proportional response to my 25 minutes, which means you planned it, which means you sat across the table from me and watched me say I don't want revenge and you had already. I made a decision, he said. His voice had changed, still controlled, but thinner now, something audible under it. I make decisions. That is what I am. I have been that for 20 years, and I don't. He stopped. She heard him breathe. I don't have a version of myself that doesn't do that. Then that's something you should have told me, she said. Yes, he said. It is. She ended the call. She walked for a long time. She didn't have a destination. She walked through Mapo and across the bridge and into the Yoido district where the financial buildings stood in glass towers, and the Han River was flat and gray below, and the cold was a specific sharp cold that came off the water and found the gaps in your coat collar and your sleeve hems and made itself known. She sat on a bench facing the river and thought about everything she knew. She thought about Ms. Choi signing the settlement that morning while she was sitting in her office saying, I know about the family. She thought about Jun Seok Han in a hospital bed with cold damage in his fingers, and what he would say when he woke up, who he would say it to, whether the man who locked a catering worker in a freezer and walked back to his party laughing would recognize the geometry of what had come back to him. She thought about Tae-hyun's voice saying, I don't have a version of myself that doesn't do that. She sat there until the cold made her stand up. She went back to her apartment and she was still in her coat standing in the middle of her small kitchen when the knock came at her door. She went still. The knock came again, 3 times, measured. She crossed to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman she didn't recognize, early 40s, in a dark coat, holding something, an envelope. She looked business. She looked like she had been sent. Amara opened the door on the chain. Miss Bennett. The woman's English was excellent, formal. My name is Lee Soo-jin. I represent Hanwoo Holdings in an advisory capacity. I'd like to speak with you, if you have a few minutes. About what? About a matter that affects both your situation and the family's current restructuring. She held up the envelope. There's an offer inside. Chairman Han asked me to deliver it personally. Chairman Han, the father. Amara looked at the envelope. It was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of paper that costs money, the kind that was supposed to feel like stability in your hands. How did you get my address? She said. A slight pause. We conducted a search of employee records filed with Silbion, which is illegal, Amara said, under Korean personal data protection law. The woman's expression didn't change, but something behind it adjusted. Miss Bennett, what's in the envelope? A settlement offer, substantially larger than the agreement reached with your employer. The chairman would like to resolve this privately, outside of any commission process. She extended the envelope again. This is not adversarial. He wants you to understand that. Amara looked at the envelope. She thought about the labor commission filing that would take 4 months and produce nothing. She thought about Ms. Choi's glasses and the 60% figure. She thought about Jun Seok Han walking back to his party. She thought about the last text Tae-hyun had sent her. I don't have a version of myself that doesn't do that. She unhooked the chain and opened the door fully and took the envelope. The woman nodded. She started to turn. Ms. Lee, Amara said. She stopped. How is he, Jun-seok? Something moved across the woman's face. Professional affect against something raw. Hai is in stable condition. He will recover. She paused. He sustained some peripheral nerve damage. Amara nodded. Thank you, she said, and closed the door. She sat at her small desk and opened the envelope. The offer was written in both Korean and English, 2 full pages. The number was in the second paragraph. It was larger than she had expected, substantially larger, the kind of number that would pay off her student loans and her parents' outstanding credit debt, and fund the language course and 6 more like it, and still leave enough to rebuild on. The conditions were in the third paragraph. She read them twice. She was to withdraw the Labor Commission complaint immediately. She was to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering all events of the evening in question and all subsequent related matters, with a penalty clause for breach. She was to make no further contact with any member of the Han family or their representatives. She was to have no further contact with, and accept no further assistance from, individuals associated with criminal enterprises in the Seoul metropolitan area. That last clause. She read it again. They knew about Tae-hyun. They knew she had been in contact with him. They were trying to use the settlement to cut that connection as much as they were trying to close the liability. 2 problems. 1 document. She recognized the logic because Tae-hyun had shown her the shape of it without meaning to. Converging interests. Things that happened to align. She put the papers down on the desk and stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A different unknown number than the one she had been using for Tae-hyun. She stared at the screen. She answered. Miss Bennett? A man's voice. Older, with the particular authority of someone who had spent decades having his voice receive immediate responses. This is Chairman Han Dae-sung. I wanted to make this call myself. She didn't speak. I understand my son behaved in an unforgivable way, he said. I'm not calling to defend him. I'm calling to tell you that what happened to him afterward, a pause, deliberate. That was not proportional, and the man responsible for it is not a safe person for you to be near. She found her voice. Are you calling to threaten me? No, he said. I'm calling to warn you. There is a difference. Another pause. Kang Tae-hyun is in the process of dismantling my family's company because of a debt dispute that has nothing to do with what happened to you. He used your situation as an accelerant. You were leverage, Miss Bennett. That is all you were to him. The words landed somewhere cold. The settlement I've offered you is genuine, Tesem, he said. The NDA is standard. I would like to resolve this cleanly. I would like my family to have a path forward. His voice dropped a register. And I would like you to remove yourself from Tae-hyun's orbit before he decides you've served your purpose. She was quiet for a long time. I'll need a few days, she said. Of course, he said, but not too many. The commission filing creates a public record that complicates. A few days, she said again. He agreed. He said goodbye with the courtesy of a man who expected to get what he wanted and saw no reason to be rude about it in the meantime. She ended the call. She sat in her apartment with the settlement papers and the dead phone screen and the soup she had made 3 days ago and now couldn't remember finishing, and she tried to locate the clean, clear line she had been walking since the night of the gala. The one that said, I want justice, not revenge. The one that said, I don't want to be part of whatever this is. And she found that the line was still there, but it was thinner than it had been, and the ground on either side of it was less stable than she had believed. Chairman Han was not wrong about everything. She knew that. A man who told half the truth in the service of his own interests was still telling half the truth. Tae-hyun had used her situation as an accelerant. He had said so himself in the language of financial timelines and debt instruments, and the Han family being in his peripheral vision for 2 years. She had not been wrong to feel the pull of that against her chest like a hook. But she also knew what she had heard in his voice when he said, I don't have a version of myself that doesn't do that. She knew the sound of something real inside a controlled sentence. She picked up the phone. She did not call Tae-hyun. She called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. She said, I need to tell you the whole thing. She told him the whole thing. He was quiet for a very long time after she finished, the kind of quiet that meant he was sitting with it, not reacting to it, which was the thing about Marcus that had always been both his best quality and his most infuriating one. Then he said, The man who saved you, you trust him? I don't know. You called him before you called me just now. She opened her mouth, closed it. The settlement, she said. One of the conditions is that I have no further contact with him. And? And I'm trying to figure out if that's a condition I can live with. Marcus breathed out slowly. Amara, listen to me. When someone locks you in a room and then their family calls you with money to stay quiet, that is not a negotiation. That is a trap. I know. And when a man saves your life and then does things without telling you, I know. Do you? He wasn't sharp, he was careful. Because it sounds like you're sitting in your apartment in a country you moved to alone trying to decide between two men who both want something from you, and you're framing it like a moral question when it's actually a safety question. He paused. Come home. Marcus, I'm not asking as your brother right now. I'm asking as the person who has talked to you every Sunday for 14 months and knows exactly what your voice sounds like when you're about to do something that's going to cost you more than you have. She pressed her knuckles against her mouth. I'm not going home, she said. Not yet. He said her name the way he only said it when he had run out of arguments and accepted the outcome. They talked for another hour, and when she hung up, the sky outside her window had gone dark, and the city had turned itself on again. The orange-white glow she had described to Marcus in October, the light that came through buildings at a specific angle that didn't exist anywhere else she had been. She picked up the settlement papers. She read the last condition again. No further contact with individuals associated with criminal enterprises. She put the papers down. She picked up the phone and typed, Chairman Han called me. He made his case. She sent it to Tae-hyun. The response came in 6 minutes. I know. I was informed when the call was placed. She stared at the screen. Of course he knew. He had people who watched these things. She typed, he said I was leverage. That's all I was to you. A long pause. Longer than usual. She counted to 42 before the response came. It said, he is not entirely wrong. She felt it move through her like the cold had, fast and complete, and reaching the center of her before she could brace for it. Another message came immediately. He is also not entirely right. Both things are true. I won't pretend otherwise. She sat with the phone in her hands and the two texts on the screen and the specific problem of a man who told the truth badly at the wrong moments. And she understood that this was the thing about Kang Tae-hyun that no one in his world had probably encountered before. Not that he was honest, but that he was honest in a way that gave you nothing to push against because he refused to make himself easier to dismiss. She was still sitting there when the third message came. It said, there's something you need to know about the gala, about why Jun Seok chose you specifically. She felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with temperature. She typed, tell me. And his response came and she read it, and the settlement papers on the desk and the phone call from Chairman Han and everything she had been carefully constructing in the last 6 days about what had happened and why collapsed completely, and she sat in the wreckage of it trying to breathe. Because it had not been random. The champagne tray. The push. The freezer. It had not been the impulsive cruelty of a drunk rich man who saw an opportunity and took it. She had been identified before the gala. Her name, her employer, her work authorization status, her connection through Sylbion to a venue that Tae-hyun's organization had been using for document transfers for 8 months. Someone had told Jun-seok who she was. Not Amara Bennett, catering worker, Black American, 23. But Amara Bennett, the woman whose brother Marcus had been in contact with a community advocacy organization in Atlanta that had, 3 months ago, formally requested documentation from a Korean-American business network connected to the outer edge of Tae-hyun's financial structure. Marcus. Someone had gotten to Marcus. Not physically, not in danger. But they had been watching Marcus's advocacy contacts, which meant they had been watching Amara's name for months before the gala, which meant the push and the freezer and the lock were not impulsive. She was not a bystander who got caught in something. She had been chosen. And Tae-hyun, sitting across the table from her with his controlled face and his precise voice, had known this for at least 3 days, and had not told her until now, tonight, with the settlement papers already on her desk and Chairman Han's voice still in her ear and every exit from this situation already accounted for by people who had been planning longer than she had known any of them existed. She put the phone down on the desk, face up, with the screen still lit, and she looked at it and she felt the shape of the room change around her. The small apartment, the space heater, the window facing another building, as though the walls had moved 6 inches inward while she wasn't looking. She was not the woman who had called the wrong number. She had been the wrong number all along, and now she had to decide what to do with that, in a city that had never been safe, with a man she did not trust and could not dismiss, and a settlement on the desk that would make her invisible again, and a brother 8,000 miles away who had been being watched without knowing it, and the growing ice-clear understanding that the only move left to her was the one she had been least prepared to make. She sat at the desk for 11 minutes without moving. She knew it was 11 minutes because she watched the clock on the phone screen without meaning to, the numbers changing with the particular indifference of time when you are trying to think and your brain keeps flinching away from the thing it needs to think about. Marcus had been watched. Her brother, in his car in a parking lot in Atlanta eating his turkey sandwich, had been in the peripheral vision of people who dealt in leverage and silence and the precise calibration of how much pressure it took to make a person compliant. He didn't know. He was going to call on Sunday and say, "Tell me something good," and she was going to have to decide what version of the truth to give him. And for the first time in her life, she understood why people lied to the people they loved most. Not out of cruelty, but out of the unbearable weight of being the one who knew. She picked up the phone. She called Tae-hyun. He answered immediately, no greeting. "My brother," she said. "He's not in danger," Tae-hyun said. "I want to say that first. You've been watching him. I became aware of the surveillance on him 8 days ago, 4 days before you called me by accident." She pressed her thumbnail into her palm, hard. The small pain sharpened her focus. "You knew who I was." "Not when I answered the phone," he said. "I found out afterward, when I ran your name through my network to understand what I'd walked into." "And then you didn't tell me?" "No." "For 6 days?" "Yes." She stood up from the desk. She couldn't sit anymore. She walked to the window and stood with her forehead an inch from the glass, the cold coming through it in a thin, steady current. "Why?" "Because if I told you immediately, you would have left. You would have assumed I was connected to whatever they were doing, and you would have been wrong, and I would have had no way to prove that to you without time." A pause. "I needed time to pull Marcus's contacts out of the monitoring system before telling you. That took 4 days." "You needed time," she repeated. "Yes." "So you managed the information. You decided when I got to know the truth about my own life." "Yes." His voice was flat, not defensive. "I did." She turned from the window. You're not even going to apologize for that." "Would an apology change what I did?" "No." "Then it would be decorative," he said. "And you don't want decoration from me. You've made that clear." She stood in the middle of her apartment and felt the anger move through her in waves. And underneath the anger was something she didn't want to name, something that recognized the logic of what he had done, even as it rejected the right he'd assumed to do it. He had cleared the surveillance on Marcus before telling her. He had protected her brother first and told her second. She understood that. She hated that she understood it. "What does Chairman Han know?" she said. "About what you just told me." "He knows his son used your identity as a provocation. He doesn't know that I know he knows. He believes the settlement offer is still viable." "Is it?" A pause. "That depends on what you want." "I want to know everything," she said. "Right now. All of it. Not when you decide I'm ready. Not when you've had 4 days to arrange the information. Everything." A long silence. "Come here," he said. "Come to the building. I'll tell you everything in person." "Why in person?" "Because this conversation shouldn't happen on a phone," he said. "And because what I need to show you is not something I can send in a text." She looked at the settlement papers on the desk, the cream envelope, the number in the second paragraph. "Give me an hour," she said. She changed clothes because the ones she had been wearing felt like the clothes of someone who had been sitting still, and she needed to feel like someone who was moving. She put on dark jeans and a sweater, and her heaviest coat, her own coat this time, not his, and she stood in front of the small mirror in the bathroom and looked at her own face and said out loud to herself, in the empty apartment, "You are not leverage, you are not a provocation, you are Amara Bennett, and you decide what happens next." It sounded more certain than she felt. She said it again anyway. Min-jae was waiting outside in the black car. She hadn't asked for him. She got in without commenting on it. They drove through the city in silence, and she watched Seoul move past the windows and thought about how 14 months ago she had arrived at Incheon Airport with 2 suitcases and a printout of her work authorization and the address of her apartment and the particular private terror of someone who has done a brave thing and is now required to live inside it. She had built something here, piece by piece in a language not her own, in a city that was indifferent to her specific loneliness. She had built something. The market 2 blocks from the apartment, the language books on the shelf, Ms. Choi's office, which she would never go back to, the Sunday calls. She was not going to let it be taken, not by Jun Seo-khan, not by his father's cream envelope, not by the network of watching eyes that had apparently been on her brother in a parking lot in Atlanta while she was doing her job. The building received them the same way it always did. The gate opened. The elevator required the key card. The floor was quiet. Taehyun was not in the room with the table and the window. Min-jae took her to a different room, further along the corridor, no window, a conference table with a laptop open, and 2 monitors mounted on the wall, displaying what looked like financial documents and a map of Seoul divided into color-coded districts. Taehyun was standing at the near monitor with his jacket off, and his sleeves rolled up, and the look of a man who had not slept and had stopped pretending he intended to. There were 2 other men in the room she hadn't seen before. They went still when she entered. "Out," Taehyun said, without looking away from the monitor. They left. Amara stood at the end of the conference table. "Talk," she said. He turned. He looked at her face and she let him look, because she wanted him to see it clearly. Not afraid, not performing, just present and waiting and entirely out of patience. "Hanwoo Holdings has been a pass-through entity for 7 years," he said. "On the surface, real estate and hospitality. Underneath, they have been moving money for a network of families who needed transactions to be invisible." He gestured at the monitor. 3 of those families are connected to a Port Authority contract that I control a portion of. Chairman Han has been skimming from that contract for 4 years. The amount outstanding in my direction is— He picked up a document from the table and handed it to her. "This number." She looked at the number. It had a lot of digits. "He's been stealing from you," she said. "From my organization." "Yes." "So this was never about the debt instruments," she said. "The credit line suspensions, the receivership. Those are real. But they are also a mechanism," she said, "to get his attention, to force him to the table." "Yes." She put the document down. "And Jun Seok targeting me. That was Chairman Han's move, not Jun Seok's." Taehyun's jaw shifted slightly. "We believe Jun Seok was given information about your brother's advocacy connections and told that you were a liability risk. That if something happened to you that complicated your stay in Korea, an incident, a reason to leave, fear, it would remove a potential pressure point before any confrontation between Han and my organization became formal." She felt her hands go cold. Not temperature, something inside. "He was trying to scare me out of the country." "Yes." "To protect his father." "Yes." She sat down. She hadn't meant to. Her legs made the decision. She sat in one of the conference chairs and put her hands flat on the table and breathed. "He turned his son into a weapon," she said, "to threaten a woman he thought was connected to you. You weren't connected to me at that point. He didn't know that." "No," Taehyun said. "He didn't." She looked up at him. "So what I was, actually, was collateral, in a fight between 2 men that had nothing to do with me." He held her gaze. "Yes. And then I accidentally called you by and the fight became personal," he said, "on my side." The room was very quiet. The monitors hummed slightly. Somewhere in the building's infrastructure, something clicked and settled. "He sent the settlement offer to contain the damage," she said. "But the real reason he wants me quiet and gone is so I can't be used against him. If I stay connected to you, you become leverage in the other direction," he said. "I become a target," she said. "Yes." He paused. "That is true." She looked at the map on the second monitor. The color-coded districts. The patient geography of power. "How long have you been planning to move against him?" 8 months. "And the gala? When it happened?" "When I called." He was quiet. "It changed something," she said. "For you. Not just the timeline." He walked around the table and sat down across from her. Not at the far end, midway, close enough that she could see the exhaustion around his eyes clearly. I have been in this work for 20 years, he said. I have made decisions that I don't apologize for. I have understood my life as something that operates outside of certain... He stopped. He tried again. I stopped expecting to be surprised by people. She waited. You surprised me, he said. In the freezer, on the phone, the way you spoke. You were terrified and you were honest and you didn't perform either one. He looked at his hands on the table. I don't meet people who do that. She said, that's not a reason to manage my information for 6 days. No, he said, it's not. It's not a reason to use what happened to me as a... No, it isn't. He raised his eyes to hers. There is no sufficient reason. I made choices that were mine to make within my world, and I pulled you into the geometry of them, and I should have told you earlier, and I didn't. I can account for the logic of each decision. I cannot make it right. She sat with that, with the fact of him saying it plainly, not dressing it up. What does Han do next? She said. If I don't sign. He has 3 remaining options. Taehyun's voice shifted back to precision. First, he escalates pressure on you directly. Immigration complications, employer contacts, the kind of ambient obstruction that makes staying in Korea more difficult than leaving. Second, he attempts to bring in outside intervention in our financial dispute, which he has been quietly exploring for 2 weeks with a network based in Busan. Third, he paused. He uses what he knows about Marcus. The cold came back to her hands. What does he know about Marcus? She said carefully. The advocacy organization your brother worked with. They had a formal data breach 14 months ago. Han's people accessed contact lists, financial records, donor information. Nothing criminal on Marcus's part, but it creates an implied association that could be used to make things complicated for him professionally if it were made public in the wrong framing. She pressed her fingers against the table edge, hard. He would go after my brother. He would use the threat of it, Taehyun said. Whether he would follow through is a different question. Men like Chairman Han prefer the threat to the action because the threat costs nothing. She looked at him. What do you need from me to finish this? The real answer. He was quiet for a moment. Your testimony, he said, about the gala, about what Jun Seok said before the freezer, on record with a specific investigative body that is not connected to the district prosecutors Han controls. Which body? Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. They have been building a secondary case against Hanwoo Holdings for 2 years on the Port Authority contracts. Your account, a foreign worker, physically harmed, with documentation of the response from Sylbion, gives them a human element that a financial case lacks. It makes the story impossible to bury. And it puts me directly in Han's sights, she said. Yes. As a witness. Yes. She stood up. She walked to the monitor with the map and stood in front of it and looked at the districts. She found Mapogu, found the dot that roughly corresponded to her apartment building, such a small dot in a very large map. If I do this, she said, what do you do? I continue what I was already doing, he said, the financial action, the debt recovery. I add your testimony to the FCIU file through a contact I have there, and I make sure Chairman Han understands that what he does to you has a multiplied consequence. You protect me. A pause. Yes. She turned from the map. I'm not asking you to protect me. I know. I'm asking what I can do myself, what leverage I have independent of you. He looked at her. The exhaustion in his face was real, and underneath it something else. The same thing she had heard in his voice when he said, I don't have a version of myself that doesn't do that. Something that wasn't quite comfort, but was adjacent to it. The look of a man recalibrating. You have the Sylbion settlement, he said. If you declined it, if it becomes known you declined it, that is itself a signal to the market that the Han family's financial offer was insufficient to contain the damage. That has value in the conversation I am having with Chairman Han. You're saying my refusal is a weapon? Yes. And my testimony to FCIU? Yes. And my staying, she said. Not leaving, not being scared out. Yes, he said. All of those things. She folded her arms. And what do you offer me? Not protection, not management. What do you offer me that is an actual exchange between two people? I was quiet for 4 seconds. Transparency, he said. From this point, everything I know that touches your life, before I act on it. That's the minimum, she said. Yes, he agreed. It is. What else? He stood. He came around the table and stopped a reasonable distance from her. Not close, not performing closeness, just standing in the same part of the room. I don't know yet, he said. I have been what I am for a long time. I don't have a practiced answer for this. She looked at him. At the scar below his left ear, at the hands that had wrapped a coat around a woman he didn't know in a freezer basement while an entire estate went on drinking champagne above them. I'm going to testify, she said. I'm going to contact FCIU myself, independently, and I'm going to give them my account, without going through you. His jaw tightened slightly. Not objection, something more complicated. I need it to be mine, she said. You understand that? Yes, he said. And I need you to not interfere with that process, not manage it, not position it. That will make it slower, he said. I know. It will give Han more time to I know, she said. It's still what I'm doing. He held her gaze, then he nodded, once. There's one more thing, she said. Yes. Marcus. I need him told. The real version. All of it. Not the version that keeps him calm and distant. He needs to know what's been happening so he can protect himself. That will worry him. He's already worried, she said. He hears it in my voice every Sunday. I would rather he be worried with correct information than reassured with a lie. Taehyun nodded again. She picked up her coat from the chair where she'd set it. She put it on. She was at the door when his voice came from behind her. Amara. She stopped. The FCIU contact, he said. Her name is Investigator Park Ji-young. She's based in the Jongno District office. She doesn't know me by name, but she knows the Han case. If you go to her directly, she will take you seriously. She turned slightly. You're giving me the contact? Yes. Even though you said you wouldn't interfere. Giving you a name is not interference, he said. It's information. You can use it or not. She looked at him for a moment. At the controlled face and the rolled sleeves and the monitors behind him with their color-coded map of a city that he understood, and she was still learning. Thank you, she said. For that. She left. In the elevator going down, she stood with her back against the wall and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way Dr. Yoon had shown her in the clinic room when the warming shakes had been at their worst. She had been doing that, the breathing, more in the past week than in the previous 14 months combined. Min-jae drove her home. She didn't speak, and he didn't try to fill it. At 2 in the morning, she sat at her desk and wrote down everything she remembered from the night of the gala. Date, time, the sequence of what happened. Jun Seok's exact words before the door closed, the temperature, the duration, what she had said to the Labor Commission, what Ms. Choi had said in her office. She wrote it in a single document, straightforward and linear, the way a statement was supposed to read. She wrote it for herself first so she knew what she had and what she could verify. She wrote Marcus's name on a separate page and then crossed it out because she didn't need to write it down to remember it. At 4 in the morning, she was almost finished when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A third unknown number. Not Tae-hyun, not the Han family representative. The text said, Miss Bennett, you should know that the decision to continue your legal action will have significant consequences for people near you. Reconsider the offer. This is the only outreach of this kind you will receive. She stared at the screen. She screenshot it. She added it to the document. She noted the time. Then she put the phone face down and finished writing. At 7:15 in the morning, with 3 hours of jagged half-sleep behind her and her statement in a folder on the desk, she heard a sound outside her apartment door. Not a knock. A sound. Like something being pushed under the gap. She went still. Then she crossed to the door on bare feet and looked through the peephole. The corridor was empty. She unlatched the chain, slowly, listening, and opened the door an inch. On the floor was an envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy. Not another settlement offer. This one had no writing on the outside. She picked it up and opened it standing in the doorway, and inside was a single photograph, printed on plain paper, slightly grainy, the kind that came from a surveillance camera. It was Marcus. Sitting in his car in a parking lot she recognized, the distribution center where he worked. The photo was dated 5 days ago. She looked at it for a long time. Then she closed the door and locked it, and sat on the floor with her back against it, and held the photograph and felt the calculation of it, the precision, the message it sent, the specific cruelty of choosing that image, that location. Her brother's ordinary lunch break rendered into a threat. Chairman Han was not waiting for her answer. He had decided the answer needed to be changed. She sat on the floor and the anger came up through her chest, and it was different from all the other versions of anger she had felt in the past week. Not the hot, immediate anger of the freezer door clicking shut, not the cold, grinding anger of Ms. Choi's eyes behind her glasses, not even the clarifying anger of the threaded texts on her phone. This was something older and quieter and much harder to move through. She thought about what Tae-hyun had said. Men like Chairman Han prefer the threat to the action. She thought about what she had said to her reflection at midnight. You are not leverage. She stood up. She picked up the phone and called Tae-hyun. He answered on the first ring. He sent me a photograph of Marcus, she said, at his workplace, 5 days ago. A silence, brief and dense. I need to move up the timeline, she said. I'm going to FCIU today, not this week, today. Amara, if you're going to tell me to wait, I'm not, he said. I have a car at your building in 8 minutes. I said independently. I know. The car takes you to Jongno District office and leaves, that's all. She thought about it for 3 seconds. Fine, she said. Are you all right? She looked at the photograph in her hand, at Marcus's ordinary face in an ordinary parking lot, made threatening by being seen. No, she said. But I'm going anyway. She was already moving toward the bedroom to change when Tae-hyun said her name once more. Yes, she said, not stopping. He made a mistake, Tae-hyun said. Sending that photograph. He told you exactly how far he's willing to go, and now you know. She stopped in the bedroom doorway. She thought about that, about the information in the threat, not just the threat itself. He's scared, she said. Yes, Tae-hyun said. He is. She put the photograph in the folder with her statement. She dressed in 4 minutes. She was at the door with her coat and her folder when the buzzer from downstairs sounded. 8 minutes, exactly. She pressed the intercom. I'm coming down, she said. She took the stairs because she needed the movement, needed the physical descent to match the thing that was happening in her chest. Not fear exactly, not anger exactly, but the particular quality of a person who has been pushed far enough back that they have run out of retreat and are now simply moving forward. The lobby door opened onto the cold morning street. The black car was at the curb. She got in. And as Min-jae pulled away from the building and turned north toward Jongno, her phone buzzed one more time. This time, it was a number she recognized, Tae-hyun's. The text said, Chairman Han called an emergency meeting this morning with his Busan contacts. It starts in 2 hours. Whatever happens at FCIU today, it needs to happen before that meeting ends. She read it twice. 2 hours. She looked up at the city moving past the windows, the morning soul gray and cold and wide open in front of her, and she felt something lock into place in her chest. Not courage exactly, not the performed kind that people talk about, but the simpler mechanical thing that happens when you have no good option left, and you pick the least bad one with your whole body, and you move. She had 2 hours, a folder of handwritten testimony, a photograph of her brother in a parking lot, and the name of an investigator who didn't know she was coming. She had been in worse positions. She had been in a freezer with 4% battery and the wrong number dialed, and she had kept counting backwards from 200, and the door had opened. She pressed the folder flat against her thighs with both palms. The car moved through the city, and somewhere in the Jongno district, in an office that handled the cases no one wanted to touch, Investigator Park Ji-young was starting her morning, not yet knowing that the door to her office was about to open, and a 23-year-old woman from Georgia was going to sit down across from her and begin talking, and that what she said in the next 90 minutes was going to change the shape of something much larger than either of them could currently see. Investigator Park Ji-young was not what Amara had expected. She had expected someone formal, armored in the particular bureaucratic distance of a government official who had learned to manage people's crises without absorbing them. What she found instead was a woman in her early 40s with ink on her left index finger and a desk so covered in stacked folders that the nameplate at the front was barely visible, who looked up when Amara knocked on the open door and said, in careful English, You look like you came a long way to get here. From Mapogu, Amara said. I don't mean the distance. She gestured at the chair across from her desk. Sit down. Tell me who you are and why you're here. Amara sat. She put the folder on her knees. She said, My name is Amara Bennett. I'm an American national on a work authorization visa. 8 days ago, I was locked in an industrial freezer at the Hanwoo Grand Estate by Jun Seok Han, the son of Chairman Han Dae-sung of Hanwoo Holdings. I was in there for approximately 25 minutes at minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I have a written statement. I have a threatening text message sent to me at 4 this morning from an unidentified number. And I have a photograph of my brother in Atlanta that was pushed under my apartment door this morning as an implied threat. She opened the folder and placed all 3 items on the desk, in that order. I was told you've been building a case against Hanwoo Holdings for 2 years. I would like to be part of that case. Park Ji-young looked at the items on the desk. She picked up the photograph first. She looked at it for a long time without expression. Then she picked up the threatening text. Amara had printed it from her phone that morning and read it once. Then she picked up the written statement and began reading, and she read the whole thing, all 4 handwritten pages, without looking up. When she finished, she set it down and looked at Amara directly. How did you know to come to me? She said. Someone gave me your name. Who? Amara held her gaze. Someone who knows this city better than I do. A pause. Park Ji-young was very good at pauses. She used them the way a surgeon used silence before an incision, to let the room settle. You understand that if you give formal testimony in connection with this case, you become a protected witness under FCIU protocols. That protection has limits. It is not absolute. I understand. And you understand that Chairman Han has resources and relationships that will make this process long, Amara said, and hard, and designed to make me want to stop. She kept her voice even. I know. I'm here anyway. Park Ji-young looked at her for another moment. Then she picked up her phone and said something in Korean to whoever answered, short and specific, and put it back down. I'm going to need someone to take your formal statement on record, she said. That will take 2 hours minimum. You have somewhere to be? Amara thought about Tae-hyun's text. The meeting in Busan. The 2-hour window. I have a deadline, she said. I need you to know that. Whatever you can begin in the next 2 hours, it matters that it begins today, not this week. Park Ji-young studied her. You know something about his timeline? Yes. And your source is not someone I'm going to name in this room, Amara said. Not yet. The investigator was quiet. Then she said, The Hanwoo Holdings case has been stalled for 6 months because we couldn't find a human entry point. The financial records are complex and they're buried, and every time we got close to something, the documentation would be restructured and we'd lose the thread. She looked at the written statement again. A foreign worker, physically harmed. A settlement paid to her employer to close off the liability. That is the thread we've been missing. Then let's not waste the 2 hours, Amara said. They didn't. The formal statement was taken in a recording room 2 doors down the hall, with a junior investigator operating the equipment and Park Ji-young asking questions in the particular careful way of someone who had been trained not to lead, but who knew exactly where she was going. Amara answered everything. She did not perform distress, and she did not perform composure. She answered what she was asked, and when she wasn't sure she said so, and when she was certain she was certain. And Park Ji-young's questions had a quality that Amara recognized as respect, the respect of a professional for someone who is being precise under pressure. At one point, 40 minutes in, Park Ji-young said, The text message from 4 this morning, do you know who sent it? I believe it originated from someone connected to Hanwoo Holdings Legal, Amara said. I can't prove that. We can, Park said. With a warrant. Amara nodded. The photograph of your brother. You said it was dated 5 days ago. The timestamp in the corner. Yes. That's surveillance. Conducted on a foreign national's family member by a Korean private entity on American soil. Park Ji-young's voice was very neutral. That is significantly outside the scope of what we were building originally. I know. It elevates this. I know, Amara said. I thought it would. Park looked at her with something that wasn't quite a smile but occupied the same neighborhood. You came in here with the whole thing assembled, she said. I've had 8 days to think about it, Amara said. And I was angry. Good, Park said. Angry is useful. The statement was completed at 9:47. Park Ji-young walked her back to the main office and picked up her phone and placed 2 calls in quick succession, neither of which Amara could fully follow in Korean, though she caught the word warrant in both of them, and a name she didn't recognize, and the specific energy of someone setting things in motion that had been waiting for permission. When she hung up, she turned to Amara. The financial division is going to move on the expanded warrant today. The human elements, what happened to you at the estate, the settlement paid to your employer, that enters the formal record as of this morning. She paused. You should know that when this becomes active, it will not stay quiet. The Han family will know within hours. They already know I'm not signing, Amara said. The photograph this morning was because they know. Park Ji-young nodded slowly. Do you have somewhere safe to be today? Amara thought about it. Yes, she said. She didn't call Tae-hyun when she left the building. She stood on the sidewalk in the cold morning air, and she called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. He had been waiting. Tell me, he said. She told him. This time, the full version, not the abridged version she'd given him earlier in the week, not the version that protected him from the weight of it. All of it. The gala, the freezer, the man who answered, the building underground, the settlement offer, the photograph under the door. She heard him breathe through the hard parts. She heard him go quiet in a way she recognized. Not the quiet of shock, but the deeper quiet of someone who is holding something large and deciding how to carry it. When she finished, he was silent for 8 seconds. Then he said, The photo of me. They've been watching me. Yes, but that surveillance was interrupted. She chose the word carefully. It's been cleared. By who? The man who answered the phone, she said. Another silence. Amara. I know. You know what I'm going to say. You're going to say be careful, she said. And I am, I promise. I went to the authorities this morning, Marcus. Real ones, the right ones. It's in motion. I need you to… She stopped, tried again. I need you to not fly to Seoul right now. I know that's what you're thinking. A long breath. I booked the ticket 2 days ago, he said. She closed her eyes. I haven't used it yet, he said. I've been waiting to see what you said today. A pause. If you tell me not to come, I won't come. But I need you to tell me straight. She stood on the sidewalk and looked at the city. The gray morning sky, the street vendors setting up their carts, a woman walking a small dog with a red coat on, 2 men in construction gear drinking coffee from paper cups outside a convenience store. The ordinary machinery of a city that had nearly killed her 8 days ago and that she was still not ready to leave. Not yet, she said. Give me 2 weeks. If anything changes, I'll call you same day. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, 2 weeks. 2 weeks? And then you tell me the truth about where you are. I'll tell you the truth now, she said. I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm okay. I'm genuinely okay. That's the first time in 8 days you've said that, and I believed it, he said. She felt her throat close a little. I know, she said. They talked for 10 more minutes about nothing important. She was getting good at this, at the conversation that held you together without requiring you to hold it deliberately. And when she ended the call, she stood still on the sidewalk for a moment, with her hand still around the phone and her face tipped slightly up toward the pale winter sky. Then her phone buzzed. Tae-hyun. The Busan meeting was canceled. Han's counsel called it off 40 minutes ago. She stared at the screen. Another message. FCIU contacted Hanwoo Holdings Legal at 9:52 with a warrant notification. Han's team knows. The cancellation happened 12 minutes later. She wrote back. That was fast. His response? That's what happens when the right thread gets pulled. She put the phone in her pocket and walked to a coffee shop 2 blocks from the FCIU building and sat at a small table near the window and drank coffee that was too hot and ate a piece of bread she didn't taste and let her body do the thing it had been trying to do for 8 days, which was simply stop. Not sleep. She wasn't capable of sleep yet. Just stop. Sit inside the moment without reaching forward into the next one. She sat there for an hour. Then she went to face what was left. The next 6 days were not clean. She had believed, somewhere in the back of her mind, that once she gave the testimony and the warrant was issued and the investigation became official, the pressure would lift, that Chairman Han would recognize the line he had crossed and step back from it. She had been wrong about that, and Park Ji-young, to her credit, had tried to warn her. The pressure didn't lift, it changed shape. On the second day, her work authorization was flagged for an administrative review. Not canceled, flagged. The kind of flag that created a 30-day uncertainty window during which she could not legally take new employment. The Sylbian contract was already voided. The flag ensured she couldn't replace it. On the third day, an article appeared on a minor Korean entertainment news site, the kind of site that published rumor and implication dressed as reporting, with a story about a foreign catering worker who had allegedly fabricated an incident at a high-profile private event to extort a prominent Seoul family. The article did not use her name, but the details were specific enough that anyone who knew what had happened would know who it referred to. She read it once. She sent a screenshot to Park Ji-young. She did not read it again. On the fourth day, Min-jae appeared at her apartment building at 7 in the morning with two things: a bag of groceries from the market, 2 blocks away, and a document from a different attorney than any she had previously encountered. A woman named Kim Hae-won, who specialized in foreign national protections, and who, Min-jae explained with careful neutrality, had been retained on Amara's behalf. Amara stood in the doorway and looked at the groceries and the document. "Who retained her?" she said. Min-jae's expression was exactly what she expected it to be. "Mr. Kong wanted me to tell you that the attorney's fee has been paid as a separate matter with no conditions attached. The attorney works for you, not for him. If you want to verify that, Ms. Kim's direct line is on the first page." She looked at the document. She looked at the groceries. There were winter squash in the bag, 2 of them, the same kind she had bought at the market 10 days ago. She did not ask how he knew about the squash. She took both. She called Kim Hae-won, and the woman answered and spoke to her for 40 minutes with the brisk professional warmth of someone who did not waste time on theater, and everything Min-jae had said was confirmed. No conditions, no reporting, no connection to Tae-hyun's interests in any legal sense. The attorney was hers. On the 5th day, Kim Hae-won filed a counter-complaint about the work authorization flag, citing the timeline of events and the correlation with the FCIU warrant notification. The flag was not immediately lifted, but it was now on record as potentially retaliatory, which was its own kind of pressure applied in the other direction. On the 6th day, Chairman Han Dae-sung requested a formal meeting, not through his lawyer, not through Ms. Lee in the dark coat. He called Park Ji-young's office directly and requested a sit-down with Amara Bennett in the presence of FCIU representation. Park told Amara on the phone. Her voice was careful. "You don't have to agree." "I know," Amara said. "He may be looking to negotiate terms, or he may be trying to assess what you actually have. Or both." "Or both," Park agreed. Amara was quiet for a moment. "I want you in the room," she said, "and my attorney." "Of course. And I want to know before I walk in there what the FCIU's current position is, what you have, what you need, what a negotiated outcome looks like from your side." A pause. "That's a sophisticated ask." "I've had a sophisticated week," Amara said. Park told her. She told her plainly, which Amara appreciated. The case was strong but complex. The financial evidence was solid. The human element Amara had provided had opened investigative avenues that had been closed for 18 months. But a full prosecution would take time, and if Han were willing to cooperate on the Port Authority contract fraud in exchange for reduced charges, that outcome served the FCIU's broader objectives. Amara's role as a witness was critical in establishing the pattern of conduct. Her cooperation was valuable. Her testimony was, Park said carefully, the piece that made the rest of it human-shaped. "So I'm useful to you," Amara said. "Yes," Park said. "I won't pretend otherwise." "I appreciate that," Amara said, "more than you know." The meeting was set for the following morning in a conference room at the FCIU Jongno office. Amara spent the evening before it at her desk, not reviewing documents, not preparing questions. She had done the preparation. What she did instead was write a letter to Marcus, not to send, just to write, the kind of letter that was really a conversation with yourself dressed in someone else's name. She wrote about the gala and the freezer and the phone call and the man who came. She wrote about Ms. Choi and the settlement papers and the cream envelope. She wrote about Park Ji-young's ink-stained finger and Kim Hae-won's brisk voice and Min Jae appearing at her door with winter squash. She wrote about what it felt like to walk into an FCIU office with a folder and 3 hours of anger and a name someone had given her because he was, in his broken and calculated way, trying. She wrote, "I don't know what I'm doing with any of this yet, but I'm doing it myself. That's the part that matters." She folded the letter and put it in the drawer where she kept her passport. Then she went to sleep and slept for 7 hours without interruption, which was the best she had done since the night of the gala. And when she woke up, the morning light was coming through the window at the specific angle she had described to Marcus in October, the one that didn't exist anywhere else she had been, and she lay in bed and looked at it for a full minute before she got up. Chairman Han Dae-sung was smaller than she had imagined him. She had constructed him in her mind from the evidence, the estate, the legal team, the surveillance, the cream envelopes, the calls made from positions of absolute assumption, and the person she had built was physically large, the way power tends to be when you imagine it from outside. The man who walked into the conference room was 70 years old, compact, with white hair, and the posture of someone who had been important for so long that importance had become structural rather than performed. He walked with a slight stiffness in his left hip. He wore a gray suit. He sat down across the table from Amara and Park Ji-young and Kim Hae-won without looking at any of them first, which she understood as a negotiating habit. You don't acknowledge the room until you're ready. His lawyer sat beside him, a different one than Ms. Lee. He looked at Amara. She looked back. For a moment, neither of them said anything, and in that moment she saw him see her. Not the liability, not the foreign worker, not the thread that had unraveled the careful architecture of the past 6 months. Just her. A 23-year-old woman from Georgia sitting in a chair in a government building because she had refused to disappear, and she was still here, and she was looking at him without looking away. Something in his face shifted, barely. She would have missed it a week ago. "Miss Bennet," he said. His English was formal and old-fashioned, the English of a man who had learned it in a different era. "I owe you an apology." The room held very still. "What happened at the estate?" he said. "My son's behavior. I did not instruct him to harm you. I want to be precise about that. What I instructed him to do," he paused, and she watched him make the choice to continue, "was to make your presence in Seoul uncomfortable, to create a situation in which leaving became the easier option." He set his hands flat on the table. "I was protecting a financial arrangement that I had allowed to become criminal. I used my son as an instrument of that protection. What he chose to do with those instructions..." He stopped. "He exceeded them, badly." Park Ji-young was writing something on her notepad without looking up. "Is that a distinction you think matters?" Amara said. "No," he said. "I suppose not." "You sent someone to watch my brother?" "Yes." "In Atlanta, on American soil?" "Yes." "And you sent me a photograph of him to make clear that you could reach him." He was quiet for a moment. "That was a mistake," he said. "Not morally, strategically. It told you how desperate I had become, and it gave you something concrete to bring to this office." He looked at the folder in front of Park Ji-young. "I have been in business for 50 years. I know when a hand has been overplayed." "You locked me in a freezer," Amara said. She kept her voice level. Not angry, past anger, into something colder and cleaner. "Not you directly, your son, with your instructions. And when I didn't die and didn't disappear, you tried to buy my silence. And when I wouldn't stay silent, you threatened my brother." She paused. "And you're here today because the alternative is worse, not because you owe me an apology." He looked at her. His expression had the quality of a man confronting an arithmetic he cannot correct. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's true. So say what you actually came to say." His lawyer leaned slightly toward him. He made a small gesture with 2 fingers. Not dismissive, just pause. And the lawyer sat back. "The Port Authority contract," he said. "The outstanding funds. The manner in which Hanwoo Holdings has been restructuring transactions. I am prepared to cooperate with this office's investigation, fully, in exchange for a negotiated framework." He looked at Park Ji-young. "I am also prepared to formally document the specific instruction I gave my son regarding Miss Bennet and the catering event, on record, The documentation would constitute an acknowledgement of directed misconduct. He looked back at Amara. Which I believe is the form of accountability you were seeking when you went to the Labor Commission. She felt something move in her chest. She pressed it down and kept her face still. And Jun Seok, she said. He will face civil liability, the chairman said. What he did, but independent of my instruction, goes beyond what I authorized. I will not protect him from that. You're offering to give up your son. My son is in a hospital bed with nerve damage in 3 fingers, he said. I failed him long before last week. I gave him a world in which he believed behavior like that carried no weight. A pause. I can't undo that. I can stop protecting it. The room was quiet. Through the window, Seoul was its ordinary January self, cold, busy, indifferent to the specific weight of what was happening on the 4th floor of a Jongno district office. Park Ji-young looked at Amara. A question in the look, not asking permission, but acknowledging that this moment belonged to her. Amara looked at Chairman Han, at the 70-year-old man in the gray suit with the stiff hip who had sent someone to photograph her brother eating a sandwich in a parking lot, who had built an empire by knowing how to move money in the dark and had spent 50 years perfecting the skill of making problems disappear. I want 3 things, she said, outside of whatever this office requires. He waited. My work authorization review gets withdrawn, today, formally, with documentation sent to the relevant agency by your legal team. Done, he said. The article on the entertainment site gets pulled and a correction is issued. A slight hesitation. His lawyer whispered something. He made the 2-finger gesture again. Done, he said. And the Silbion settlement, she said. The money they received to close my complaint. That money gets matched, the same amount, donated to the Seoul Foreign Workers' Rights Center, not anonymously, in the company's name. The hesitation was longer this time. His lawyer wrote something on his pad. Chairman Han looked at what was written and then looked at Amara. You want the record to show what the payment was for, he said. I want the record to show that Hanwoo Holdings has a debt to the people it treated as invisible, she said, and that it paid part of it. He looked at her for a long moment. She held the look without effort. She had stopped having to remind herself not to look away. Yes, he said. Done. She nodded once. She looked at Park Ji-young. I'll let you take it from here. She stood. Kim Hae-won stood with her. At the door, Amara stopped. Chairman Han. He looked up. Your son will remember that freezer for the rest of his life, she said. So will I. I want you to know that I'm not interested in those being equivalent. What happened to him was done by someone else, using my situation as the measure. I didn't ask for it, and I don't claim it. She held his gaze. But I do claim what happened to me. And I need you to know that I will always claim it, no matter what this process concludes. He was quiet. Then he said, with the gravity of someone for whom the word costs something, I know. She left. In the corridor outside, Kim Hae-won touched her arm briefly. Not a hug, just a touch, the professional equivalent of I see you, and then went back inside because she had work to do. Amara walked down the corridor to the elevator and stood waiting for it. And when the doors opened, she got in and stood in it alone for the 4 floors down, and the doors opened onto the lobby, and she walked out into the cold air of the street. She stood on the sidewalk. She did not call anyone. She stood there for a few minutes, in the cold, in the noise of the city, and breathed. Then she walked. She didn't have a destination. She walked south through Jongno and into the streets that spilled down toward the river, past the old neighborhoods where the buildings were lower and the street food carts were already setting up, and the smell of tteokbokki came off a grill somewhere to her left in a wave of spice and sweetness. She walked past a school where children were arriving in 1s and 2s, their backpacks enormous relative to their bodies. She walked past a hardware store and a pharmacy and a dog grooming salon with a cartoon poodle painted on the glass. She walked until the river appeared between buildings, flat and gray and moving. And she found the path that ran along the bank, and she followed it for a long time in the January cold, her hands in her pockets, her coat buttoned to the throat. She thought about a lot of things. She thought about the freezer, the sound of the lock engaging, the specific feeling of manufactured cold against the skin of her arms, the white of her breath in the fluorescent light, the moment when she had realized the keypad code wasn't working and had laughed, a small strange laugh, because of the sticker on the Wagyu package. She thought about that laugh, about how it had come out of nowhere in the worst moment, not from anything being funny, but from some deeper mechanism in her that had refused to be entirely extinguished. She wanted to remember that laugh. She thought it was important. She thought about Tae-hyun. She had not seen him since the night she had left his building with the folder and the photograph of Marcus and the decision to go to FCIU alone. He had texted. She had responded. The communication had been factual and necessary, and she had been grateful that he had not pushed beyond what was necessary because she had needed the space to do what she had done without the weight of him in the room. But she thought about him. She was honest with herself about that. She thought about the coat, the way he had taken it off his shoulders without breaking stride. She thought about the 4 words he had said to Minjae in the kitchen of the Hanwoo estate, "Tell me where she was," and the way he had looked away from Jun Seok immediately afterward, as though someone who used their position to harm a woman in a service corridor had ceased to be interesting. She thought about the honest and poorly timed truths he had told her. She thought about what he had said when she'd asked what he could offer her, transparency. And she thought about whether transparency, from a man who had lived 20 years in darkness, was the hardest thing he had or the easiest. She stopped walking. She was at a section of the river path where a low wall ran along the edge, and she sat on it and looked at the water moving and took out her phone and looked at the message thread with Tae-hyun. The last message was from 2 days ago. Kim Hae-won confirmed the authorization review withdrawal documentation has been submitted. You don't need to thank me. She had not thanked him. She had written, I know. And then nothing. She typed now. It's done. He cooperated. FCIU has what they need. She sent it. She watched the screen. The response came in 3 minutes. I know. Park Ji-young's office notified the relevant financial division 20 minutes ago. She shook her head slightly. Of course he knew. She typed, Can I ask you something? A pause. Then, yes. She typed, The night in the freezer, when you were on the phone with me. You told me to tell you something I liked. I said the light in October. And you didn't say anything about it. You just kept asking me questions. She sent it. A longer pause. His response, I was keeping you talking. That was the priority. She typed, I know, but you remember it. The October light. A pause that stretched long enough that she looked up from the phone at the river and then back down. His response, yes, I remember it. She sat with that. She typed, I'm at the river. Han River Path, South Jongno side. I'm going to sit here for a while. If you wanted to... She stopped. She deleted the last sentence. She retyped it. If you wanted to come, you could. She sent it before she could revise it again. The response came quickly. Give me 20 minutes. She put the phone in her pocket. She sat on the low wall and looked at the river and the gray January sky above it, and the city on the far bank with its lights and its buildings and its absolute indifference to individual lives. And she felt the cold come through her coat and find the backs of her thighs where they pressed against the stone of the wall, and she did not move. 22 minutes later, she heard footsteps on the path behind her. She did not turn around. He sat on the wall beside her. Not close, a foot of space between them. He had a coat on, a different one than the one she'd worn home from the estate. He looked at the river. Neither of them spoke for a while. It's done, she said. Yes. All of it. Most of it. He glanced at her. The legal process will continue for months. You understand that. I know, but She searched for the right word. The acute part. The part where I'm being threatened and managed and made to feel like a problem to be solved. She looked at the water. That part is done. He nodded. Jun Seok, she said, still in hospital. He'll be there another 2 weeks. His father has retained separate civil counsel for him. That process will run parallel to the FCIU case. He'll never be the same, she said. Not with satisfaction. Just with the particular weight of consequence, which was different from satisfaction and always would be. No, Tae-hyun said. Was that... I'm not asking if it was right. I'm asking if you knew it would go that way. The lock, the system error. He was quiet. Tae-hyun. I knew it was possible, he said. I didn't engineer the specific outcome. A pause. I set conditions that made certain outcomes more likely. That's a fine line. Yes, he said. It is. She looked at him. I was looking at the river with his jaw set and his hands in his coat pockets, and he looked like what he was. A man who had made choices he couldn't unmake, and who had stopped pretending that made him comfortable. I'm not going to tell you it was wrong, she said. I've been trying to. I've been trying to locate the clean position where I can say that clearly and mean it. She looked back at the water. But I keep coming back to what I know, which is that he walked back to that party. He locked me in, and he went back and he laughed. And I don't... She stopped. I don't have a version of myself that feels nothing about what happened to him. Taehyun was quiet. You said that to me, she said. That you don't have a version of yourself that doesn't do what you do. Yes. I've been thinking about that. She watched a piece of ice move slowly in the current. I think most people are like that. Most people don't have a version of themselves that's entirely clean. They just have the parts they're honest about and the parts they aren't. He turned to look at her. I'm not saying what you do is fine, she said. I'm saying I understand the sentence. She met his gaze. That's different. He looked at her for a long moment. In the flat winter light, with the river behind him and the city noise around them, he looked tired in the specific way of someone who had been carrying something for a very long time and had recently been asked to put it down and didn't quite know how to stand without the weight. I told you I would be transparent, he said, from this point. Yes. There are things in my world that you will not like, that will happen in the future, and that I will tell you about, and that you will not like. I know. And you're still... He stopped. I'm still here, she said. For now. Something moved in his face. Not a smile, something quieter than a smile. The particular expression of a man who has been told something true and is choosing to receive it without trying to improve it. For now, he repeated. It's what we have, she said. Neither of us knows what comes after now. That's not a problem. That's just, she looked at the river, what it is. They sat there for a long time. The city moved around them. The river moved. The light shifted in the way that January light shifts, without warmth, but with a certain honesty, illuminating things as they were, rather than as they might be on a better day. A child ran past on the path with a yellow coat on, his grandmother following at a pace that was less chasing and more tolerant surveillance. A couple walked by sharing a single thermos, passing it back and forth without speaking. A man in his 60s sat on a bench across the path and fed something to the birds with the deliberate calm of someone who had been doing the same thing for 30 years and saw no reason to stop. Amara watched all of it. She felt her shoulders drop, finally, a release she hadn't been aware of holding. The light in October, Taehyun said. She looked at him. You said it comes through the buildings at a specific angle, he said, that it doesn't exist anywhere else. Yes. Show me, he said, when October comes. She looked at him, at the controlled face and the steady eyes and the man underneath both of those things. The man who had answered a wrong number phone call at 1 a.m. and driven through the frozen city because a woman told him the truth about what was happening, and he had found, after 20 years of not being surprised by people, that he was surprised. October is 9 months away, she said. I know. A lot can happen in 9 months. Yes, he said. It can. She looked at the river. Okay, she said. They sat until the cold became too much, and then they walked back along the river path the way she had come. Not close, not holding anything, just walking in the same direction at the same pace, the city loud around them and the water moving to their left and the winter light doing what winter light does, falling on everything equally, the important and the ordinary, the healed and the still healing, the things that had been lost and the ones that had been, against all reasonable expectation, found. She did not know what came next. She had stopped pretending she did. She knew she was staying in Seoul. She knew she was rebuilding, not the same things she had been building before the gala, because those things had been dismantled, and she was not interested in rebuilding what had already proven fragile. Something else. Something that knew what she knew now, that had the freezer in it, and the wrong number, and the October light, and the 9 months of days that were still in front of her, each one its own discrete weight to be picked up and carried. She thought about the letter she had written to Marcus and put in the drawer with her passport. She thought, I'm not done here yet. She had said it to him on the phone 8 days ago without fully knowing why. She knew now. She was not done because she had not yet become the person the past 8 days had started making her. That person was still being assembled, slowly, in the cold, along the river, one honest conversation at a time. That was enough. That was, for now, exactly enough. Weeks later, when the worst of the administrative proceedings had settled into the slower machinery of legal process, when the Foreign Workers' Rights Center had received the Hanwoo donation and issued a public statement that appeared in 3 newspapers, including one she had not expected, when Kim Hae-won had filed the final document reinstating her work authorization, with a note on the cover page that said in plain Korean, "This should not have been necessary," Amara sat at her desk and wrote the letter again. The real one this time. Not the draft to herself dressed in Marcus's name. She wrote to Marcus directly. She told him everything, the version he had been waiting for. Complete, sequential, honest about the parts that weren't clean, and the larger parts that were simply complicated and would remain so. She told him about Taehyun plainly, without apology and without over-explanation, the way you tell the people who love you about the people who have entered your life when you are not certain of the shape they will take, but you are certain they are real. She told him the freezer had changed her. She did not say how, because she was still finding out. She ended the letter with what she always owed him, something good. She wrote, "The light here in October is the thing I told you about. I'm going to show someone else what it looks like this year. Come visit when you can. I'll cook. Bring your own bread." She mailed it the old way, in an envelope with a stamp, because some things deserve to travel slowly. And in a city that had tried to make her invisible, Amara Bennett sat in her small apartment with the window facing another building and the space heater ticking in the corner, and she was seen, and she was here, and she was, with all the effort that word